Hello and welcome to this episode of the P&E podcast. My name's Jack Jacob and I am your host. In this episode, I have the privilege of speaking with the healthcare leader, Sir Thomas Hughes-Hallet, who is the chairman of Chelsea and Westminster NHS Trust. Sir Tom is also the founder and chair of Helpforce. Sir Tom gives a fascinating account of his life and career journey. He admits to having a very privileged life and being lucky to attend some of the world's most prestigious institutions, including Eton College and Oxford University. On a gap year from university, he lived in Zimbabwe for a year, teaching in the first mixed-race school, and we discussed how this was possibly what set the scene for his passion of volunteering and charity work later in his life and career. Sir Tom spent his early career as a barrister and then moving into investment banking. Sir Tom felt there was more to give and decided for the last few decades of his career to really giving back. Firstly, heading up Marie Curie Cancer Care as their CEO, to then going on to setting up a number of charitable organisations himself. This episode really offers a unique view on leadership, work and life from someone that has worked in both the fast-paced world of investment banking to someone that also has led major charitable initiatives and healthcare organisations. Please do enjoy this episode as we get to know the person behind the job title. This episode of the P&E podcast is sponsored by the Virtual HPN Expo. The Virtual HPN Expo will be taking place across the 17th and 18th of November on a state-of-the-art virtual events platform. The event will be CPD accredited and will host over 1,000 delegates across the 2 days. There'll be 40 exhibitors, 80 speakers addressing one main auditorium room and 4 breakout theatres, with the exhibitors being hosted across 4 exhibition zones. There'll be key themes around health inequalities, diversity and inclusion, workforce and well-being, AI and RPA, telehealth and virtual care, and improvement and innovation. We'll also be touching upon culture and leadership. To register as a delegate or to inquire about exhibiting, please visit our website, which is www.virtualhpnexpo.com. So Tom, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much for spending some time with me this morning.
It's my pleasure.
So look, I just want to cover some of your journey really, and from your early life to now. And so I think it makes sense then to start with your kind of your childhood and where you grew up.
Yeah. Well, I had a very happy childhood. I was born in Norfolk, and my father was like a farm manager, except he managed estates for people. So I was brought up in an agricultural setting, and it was pretty blissful, with a brother and a sister in Oxfordshire. And my dad only ever had 2 jobs in his entire life, and he worked from 21 until he was 77. And both jobs were in the Cotswolds. So one was looking after a big estate called Cornbury, where there's now a festival. And the other was one of the most beautiful arboretum and farms. So it was a lovely life working on the farms. I was terrified of horses, so I didn't do any of that stuff. But it was a idyllic childhood.
Yeah. Oh, lovely. Yeah. See, I love that farm smell. When you walk into a farm, and it's a smell that you can never mistake, is it? And I think it's real, that the most natural smell out there. You walk into a farm and you know where you are, and they kind of settle you in when you smell that smell. So talk to me about schooling then, because you went to Eton, and what was that like as an experience for you?
What was it like? Well, it was obviously a very privileged life, wearing some pretty unusual clothes. We had to wear tails every day, a tailcoat and sort of stripy trousers. A bit like butter, but it is an amazing school. So I got used to a school that had been around since the 15th century, and with a lot of the buildings were of great age. Made a lot of friends who stayed with me for life, and it wasn't a very snobby place. I think it probably has a sort of very snobby ring to it. It was a very privileged place, but its great skill was giving people confidence and the space to work out what they could be good at.
Yeah.
And I wasn't a natural games player. I was good at tennis, but nothing else. And what I discovered was an absolute love of choral singing. And again, that stayed with me for the whole of the rest of my life.
Amazing.
So I was in every choir going and learning instruments, and it was fantastic.
No, lovely. And then you, from Eton, you went on to Oxford, didn't you?
Mm-hmm.
And again, what was that like, going from a prestigious school to then the probably the most prestigious university in the world?
Yeah. Well, again, it was a huge privilege again. I really love old buildings, and as I've already said to you, I love music. So every night of the week, I sung evensong in the choir. I was a choral scholar, which sounds very grand. It wasn't at all. And fell in love disastrously on a number of occasions. And thoroughly enjoyed my degree. I mean, the university is split into people in those days who went there for a good time and those who went there to learn. And I tried to do both. It was a wonderful 3 years.
Yeah, amazing. And then I read that you spent some time in Zimbabwe as well. What was that like as an experience for you, going from, grand buildings like, in Oxford and in Eton and so on, to then a country that isn't grand, and most people aren't privileged? What was that like as the contrast for you?
Well, it was my gap year. And so I was there for nearly a year, teaching in the first mixed race school in what was then Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe.
Yep.
I sometimes describe it as the best year of my life. I grew up. I bought a pale blue 1940s Ford and tootled round, worked really well actually, tootled round dirt roads in this car which I called Ermintrude, and covered in stickers, which there were no girls around, so there was no fun to be had. They were all in South Africa. It was a pretty odd place, Zimbabwe, actually, but I loved the teaching and I loved the experience. And of course, it's a beautiful country to which terrible things have happened since.
It's my mum was actually born in Rhodesia.
Was she?
Yeah.
Was she?
So my grandma and my granddad moved out there for. I think my granddad got a job out there, and then my mum and my auntie were born in Rhodesia, and then they spent some time in. I think it was around the time just before it really kind of kicked off out there, and they moved then to South Africa and then back to England. So yeah, but I've never been, and I don't know if my mum's been back actually since. So that's definitely on the to-do list to go and visit that country in my lifetime.
Good for you.
Yeah. So how was that because I know that you're super passionate about volunteering and giving now and those kind of good things. Would you say that Zimbabwe work was your first kind of real exposure to volunteering and kind of giving back?
I hadn't thought of it that way before, but I think you might be right, actually. I think you might be right. I mean, I wouldn't want you to think I'm a sort of lifetime goody. As we'll come on to, I was a horrible capitalist for most of my working life. But I do think that you might be right. I'd never thought about it that way before, but certainly there I learned that by putting a lot into things, you get a lot back.
Yeah, indeed. So talk to me about your career then, because you know, we spoke off air actually about how your career has gone from, you know, what you know, okay, excusing the barrister part of it, but the investment banking side of things that, you know, from the outside world probably seen as quite a greedy role and money grabbing and those kind of things, to then working as the CEO for you know, major charities and then really kind of committing your life from the early 2000s, or from about 2000 to really giving back and doing good and really pushing not within those organizations but actually across the UK and in politics for better or easier access to giving money and to charitable work and so on. So talk me about through your career and how that kind of that flip of your career happened.
Okay, well, perhaps we'll talk more about the latter than the former, but as far as the former is concerned, I mean, I trained as a barrister. I didn't enjoy it very much. I found it very lonely. I found my fellow barristers were incredibly inward looking.
Okay.
Most conversations started with the judge told me that I'd done a wonderful summary at the trial. And they never seemed to talk about their clients. It was always about themselves.
Yeah.
So I left quite quickly, and by then I'd fallen in love, and my wife and I wanted to get married, and she was supporting me. And male pride, I think, got the better of me. And so I went into the city really to earn some money, actually. Not to make a lot of money, but to earn some money, because I wasn't earning any money at the bar.
Yeah.
And it was fun, you know. It was slightly the days of the Wild West in the 1980s. They were the sort of the golden years of excitement in the city. Things were getting more regulated, but it was all about deals, and Europe was growing in importance. And I was part of a group of people who started an investment bank in 1982. Backed by Swedish money, and it became extremely successful. I don't think because we were good at the job. I think it was much more that our timing was immaculate.
Right.
And we were all incredibly young. We were all in our 20s, a couple in their 30s, but we were very, very young, and we were entrepreneurial. We had no idea what we were doing. And that was very helpful because it meant that we could do what we thought was right. I don't mean right in a sort of ethical way. I mean right in terms of building a business, rather than doing it the way it had been done before. So we were pioneers in many ways. And also, I within the business, I started a new business, which was the securities business. It was a research business for European equities. And I spotted, again, by accident, but it paid off, that it was very difficult for women to do well in the city. So I recruited mostly, I was able to recruit very talented young women. And although the firm was called Enskilda, in the city it was known as St. Hilda's, because I'd recruited so many women. And that really worked. And then, but we worked 24/7, round the clock, made a lot of money, but paid the price. And in 1990, I had a mental collapse, basically. As much through exhaustion. I was flying 4 days a week. I was never at home. I never saw my children. I never saw my wife. And it was a partial wake up. And so I left. But then I was running what was the 12th biggest bank in Britain. And I realized that it was a mistake. I didn't think I was very good at it any longer. And so I jumped ship and spent 7 years working for an established British investment bank in a job with the benefit of hindsight, which I don't think I was very good at and which I didn't enjoy very much, although I loved the place. It was a really nice firm. And so I began to acquire an interest in other things. And at that stage, started to work for two charities as chairman. One was the Michael Palin Centre for Stammering Children, and my son is a stammerer, my youngest son. And then I was asked if I'd come and help rescue the largest housing association ever to go into supervision, which was called English Churches Housing Group.
Okay.
And I went in as their chair. And from that, I never looked back. And when the bank was sold in 1999, I acquired capital because I was a shareholder. And I thought, right, that's it. And my wife said, you seem to enjoy what you do in the evening so much more than you do in the day, what you do in the day. Why don't you do something your children can be proud of?
Yeah, makes sense.
And that was it. That was the life-changing moment.
Yeah. And so you said before about you wasn't spending much time at home, you was traveling a lot, you wasn't spending much time with your children. Do you feel that it was that time in 1999 when the bank was sold and you kind of drew out that the capital that you had in the shares and so on, do you feel like that was almost like the perfect time where you could just now reflect on what you've achieved in your kind of career, and start giving back, but also start giving back to your family and spending more time at home and that kind of stuff, or did you get really stuck into the work with the charities and
yeah. Well, the answer to both is yes, because the great thing is I was lucky enough to become chief executive of Marie Curie, and I don't actually think I thought I wanted to do less. I mean, I'm 66 in a week's time, and I still don't feel really I want to do less. But I want to do different, and I want to do different again now. But then I was only 46. I wasn't ready to stop leading. So yes, I threw myself body and soul into it, but I also balanced my life way better.
Right.
So, and of course, I didn't have to travel except to places I'd never been before, which were called Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, and England. I mean, because our entire business had been overseas. And I discovered that I loved it. I loved getting on the train in the morning and going up to Newcastle and meeting people from Tyneside, and I just loved it. I loved it.
Yeah,
loved the job.
How was that? Because there's not an obvious path from kind of investment banker to then the CEO of a huge charity, and a charity that is so well known and does so much good work. So how did that job? How did you approach kind of applying for that job or being spoken about going into that role? What was that conversation like?
Well, in terms of applying for it, I never thought I'd get it.
Yeah.
But I did wonder whether, I didn't know, but I thought possibly the skills that I'd acquired in the city were transferable. In terms of raising money, that's what you do in the city, it's what you do in charities.
Of course.
In terms of productivity and efficiency, and I sort of guessed that a wonderful organization like Marie Curie could probably be more productive and efficient. And indeed, while I was there, we significantly reduced the number of people who worked for us. I mean, really significantly.
Right.
And dramatically increased the amount of care we provided and the amount of money we raised. So I was right about that. And bringing, I'm afraid, tough love to the organization. And some basic things that really struck me about the charity sector at the time, which was the charity sector then, and perhaps even now actually, has this preponderance for recruiting people from outside. And actually, the NHS is not dissimilar. It's got this sort of obsession with advertising to bring in people to the top jobs. Well, why did you grow your own? And so I say goodbye to most of the board of Marie Curie. But every single person who then became a director was still there when I left 12 years later, with one exception. And with one exception, they were all internal promotions.
Incredible.
Yeah, it was. But no, I was like a child playing with toys. I mean, I just couldn't believe how lucky I was. It was such a wonderful organisation. And this is going to sound incredibly patronising, but for the first time in my life, I was working with real people who really cared and wanted to do something extraordinary, which was to improve the lives of people who were dying. And there was no going back after that. I couldn't possibly work in the city now. I'd hate it.
Yeah, of course. Just going back a bit as well, you mentioned before about, you had a mental breakdown and you suffered with kind of mental health issues, and that was 1990, right?
Yeah.
And I can't imagine that many people, mental health wasn't a public thing then, was it? Or no one advocated good mental health. No one spoke about resilience and looking after yourself and being positive and those kind of good things that are so heavily spoken about today, and positive affirmations, gratitude, and those kind of things. What was that like with you trying to deal with that? Because you had a very senior role within an organization that potentially could have seen that as a weakness, and did you have to kind of deal with that in a certain way?
We were a very close team, and they were extraordinarily good to me at the time. Sorry, they always were, but I mean at that moment,
yeah,
the team, my colleagues were very good to me. I took 6 months off. I think they recognised, as I did, that it was almost an inevitable consequence of the amount of work. As it happened, 2 of my colleagues died very young, and I think it took its toll on all of us. And in a way, I was lucky. I got away with panic attacks, basically. In terms of talking to future employers about it, I told them at interview. So Marie Curie, I told them at my interview. I didn't talk about it publicly at all at that time. That came much later on. Was I embarrassed by it? No. I thought about it in the way you might think about flu or perhaps a disability. But I don't think anyone was terribly interested, frankly, and I didn't particularly want to talk about myself. But then it became more interesting the more senior I became, in a way, because I suddenly realized I had an asset rather than a liability.
Yeah.
And the asset was very simple, which was that it was something I could give to other people, which was evidence that you can have had a mental problem, continue to have it, and succeed.
Yep.
So I kind of, for me, it's a bit of a badge of honor now. I'm sort of, I don't mean badge of honor in the sense of, I've done okay despite having that. I actually think of it as an asset, as that I should share with other people, actually.
Yeah.
As long as I don't bore them. I think I've done my sharing, by the way. I sort of feel that a lot of people are talking about it now. So there's less of a need now. Whereas when I first started talking about it, which must be 10 years, 15 years ago now, people were quite surprised that I was prepared to.
Yeah, I can imagine, because even 10, 15 years ago, it wasn't something that was, it was spoken about, or, did I know what anxiety, so 15 years ago, I would have been, 10, 11. Would I have known what anxiety was back then? I don't think I would have.
No.
I don't know if I would have known about what mental health was, or mental health challenges. There was, the world's changed, hasn't it, a lot since then? So yeah, and I get what you mean about the asset thing. I think one thing that I take away from that is that you can now resonate with people, right, about it, and you can really, and I suppose you can help prevent other people from going through it through your experiences, and understand kind of the lead ups to that kind of challenges, and
you can be quite tough with them too, which is where one can help. I mean, if you were saying to me, I'm not working because I'm getting panic attacks, and we were sitting together, I'd say, "God, poor old you, that's a nightmare. I mean, first of all, have you been to a psychiatrist?" And press you on that and push you on that. And you'd say, "No, I've been to a therapist." I say, "Well, has that done you any good?" "Yeah, a bit, yeah, but I'm still getting them." And I say, "Well, look, it's like flu, it's a nightmare, but it is curable. Go and see a psychiatrist. There's no shame in it. I have, and I still take the same drug." And I mean, I think the psychiatrists of Britain owe me a favour, because I'm constantly referring people to because therapy is a wonderful thing, but sometimes it's not enough. And you need some chemicals too. And I take a healthy dose of chemicals every morning of my life. And prescribed chemicals, I hasten to add.
Yeah. To clarify. Makes sense. Let's move on a little bit, because I want to talk about, I read some really interesting quotes from yourself that you've said on videos or in interviews and so on. And one of them was, "Nothing in life really matters." What did you mean by that? Because I thought that was a really interesting point that you made.
Well, it's linked, actually. I'm a terrible worrier. And it's taken me 60 odd years to realize that quite a lot of what we worry about, as in 95%, it's just not worth it. If there's something at work that's troubling you and keeping you awake, and if you just ask yourself, does this really matter? I mean, or if you think, I don't know, that you're not going to get the job you wanted, or you're not going to get the promotion you wanted, it's not the end of the world. And in fact, I also believe in fate. I do think that sometimes there is someone somewhere with a steering wheel who that thing that's worrying you and troubling you and keeping you awake, and you're better without it, because there's lots of good stuff out there that can occupy your mind in a different way. By the way, I'm not very good at this myself. That's why it's, if you like, I talk about it a lot.
Yeah, of course.
Because I do worry a lot, and it does keep me awake. And I remind myself of it all the time. Focus on what matters. I mean, the NHS is not without politics.
Yeah.
And sometimes it troubles me. I worry about where I'm placed in that, or where the hospital's placed in that. But it doesn't matter. All that matters is our patients. So I think it's just worth remembering that sometimes. And if something is really worrying you, focusing on things that do matter.
Yeah. So yeah, because I was going to talk about kind of your dislike of politics, and I find, and actually I think one thing that COVID's done for the NHS is helped remove a lot of the politics and bureaucracy and the red tape that
That's true.
that exists on whether it be the purchasing decisions or getting things done and so on. So yeah, do you resonate with that?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
Hold on. I'm sorry about this signal.
That's okay. No worries. No, it's okay. So yeah, I think that like I said, one thing that I think COVID's done is around, the removal of those politics and made decisions perhaps easier to make. Talk to me about kind of leadership then, because I know that you're passionate about, inspiring people by leadership and how important that is. What would you say your leadership style is?
Well, I try to lead by example. And that hasn't always helped me, because I've always been the person who's first in and last out. And I think that was one of the reasons I had the problems that I did have. So it's had to be amended, if you like. So I'm always very open with people. I think people are more likely to want to work for you if you tell them what's going through your mind, and they're more likely to follow you. In the NHS, we talk a lot about confidentiality, which of course is relevant when it comes to patients, but in my view is largely irrelevant in every other respect. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does make sense. It does make sense.
So I spend a lot of time thanking people. In a large organization, that's hard work, but it's worth every ounce you put into it. So I write a lot of personal letters to staff in the NHS to thank them for what they're doing, and if they get an award or whatever. I'm a great believer in management by walking about. So, and of course that stopped. That worries me a lot, actually. COVID's put an end to that. I mean, I'm not allowed to walk around our hospital any longer. And I miss it terribly. I don't see the patients, I don't see the staff, and I think you lose touch quite quickly. So I'm only quite keen on the new habit of working from home. I think it has a lot of advantages, and I think it has many, many disadvantages that large companies are going to come to regret. And I do anticipate strongly that this will lead to increased mental health issues in the workforce. I'm absolutely convinced about it. People will sit at home, becoming paranoid, not being able to read the body language, not being able to give each other a hug.
Yeah,
you can't do that at the moment anyway, but
no.
I think people are going to miss it all a lot. And it's very short-sighted, because how are you going to recruit people? How are people who are recruited then going to feel part of the team? I think that I'm concerned about it, actually.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've gone off track, but
no, not at all, not at all. I think it's a really important point you made, and I think I completely resonate with that, because the only time that I would say that I've really suffered mentally, I left a job once in a company that was quite a vibrant office, lots of people around me that were my age, lots of banter and kind of that kind of camaraderie and that team spirit. I basically went to then a competitor when I left that job, and they were based in Leeds. I didn't want to work in the city. I'm based down in West Sussex. I didn't want to travel into the city every day. It just doesn't appeal to me. And so I thought, well, this company was quite small and quite young, and there was an opportunity to work with them, but work from home. And I'd done it for about 8 months, and it almost paralyzed me, in the sense that I couldn't bring myself to do anything productive half the time. It was, and then I then eventually got a job, a like a co-working space. But because I was on the phone the whole time, and it was a lot of, techies and developers and graphic designers and stuff, again, they just stuck me in a room on my own, because my phone was telephone based, and I couldn't really be in the co-working space around people on the telephone. And I look back, and I sometimes I couldn't remember the drive home, because I was so just mentally drained. And actually, I'm pleased it happened, because it's part of my journey, and it's part of kind of where I am today. And it was me then leaving that job to then start Partnership Network Events, and start this business that and that was actually part of the reason that, like I said, I wanted to stay in the industry that I was in, but I didn't want to travel to the city to be in it. And so I thought, well, I know that I can do this, and I've proved that I can do it now. It was the start of me starting my business. So, I think, good things can come out of these situations if you realize it early enough. And I certainly did realize that it was not good for my mental health to not be around people and so on. But at the same time, in the same breath, where I've now been, 3 years into running a business and so on, I actually quite enjoyed the 2-3 months from working at home during COVID, because it allowed me not to have any distractions, and it allowed me to
I agree with that.
Yeah, to get on with what I wanted to do.
Yeah, and it's lots of advantages. I agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Before we wrap this up, I just want to ask you a few bits about, your personal life and what you do to kind of relax. You've got a job where you've got, you're the chairman of Chelsea and Westminster NHS Foundation Trust. It's a role with huge pressures, as well as you're a non-exec director at a few other organisations as well. What do you do to relax and unwind? What do you do as kind of a hobby?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm quite good at it now, is the answer to that. Which I used to be absolutely dreadful at it, but I'm quite good at it now. And in no particular order, and it's not exactly relaxing, this first one, but I started this charity Helpforce 3 years ago now, to support the NHS with volunteering, and it has been a comparative success. And again, the timing was right, rather like with the investment bank. And that gives me an enormous amount of pleasure. Now, it is work, let's be quite clear about that, but I'm not the chief executive, I'm the founder. And that does help me to relax, actually. And I'm about to get stuck into a project working for the organisation I founded in Brent and in Hounslow, really supporting some of the most disadvantaged people in our health system through volunteering. So that helps.
Yep.
But I don't think that was your question, really. I mean, the thing that more traditional relaxation, I love gardening. And I really love it. And I like the physical work as much as the sort of looking at the pretty flowers and the delicious vegetables. I do like the hard work of hoeing and raking, and I've become quite anal about it, actually. And so we have a cottage in Suffolk, and it's turned from being a field 30 years ago into being a living garden now, and that gives me a great deal of pleasure. I told you I was obsessed by choral music, so I listen to it a lot. I support one particular choir as a bit of a groupie. It's called the 16, and it's one of the best choirs literally in the world. There's no way I could ever have qualified to sing in it, but I love listening to it. I help them raise money. They very kindly sang at my daughter's wedding. And then finally, after 66 years, I've discovered that I love my grandchildren. And I never spent any time with my own children. So I'm catching up now. And I find them exhausting, but they give me a great deal of pleasure. And we've just had 3 weeks with both of them. And that's good. And I read a lot. I'm a voracious reader, and my darling brother, who died last year, he likewise was a voracious reader, and it was kind of a book club, the two of us recommending either works of intellect to each other or cracking good thrillers. My sister is a very successful author, and so we never told her about the thrillers. We only told her about the books of intellect that we were reading. So yeah. And I love talking to people. I mean, I can't really remember why I said I do this call, and in fact, or how we met in the first place virtually. But when I saw it was in my diary this morning, I thought, that's really interesting. I don't know who Jack Jacob is, but I'm going to find out, and I'm really looking forward to it. So I love that. And then the final thing is, I do like helping people who are younger than me, and I find that very relaxing. Which is, if you're struggling in your career or whatever, you might ring me up, in 2 years' time and say, do you remember we did that podcast together? I'm a bit stuck. I'm not quite sure what to do with my life now. Can I come and have a cup of tea with you? And I do quite a bit of that, of helping people of all ages, but predominantly younger people.
Well, I'll definitely take you up on that offer.
Think through what they're going to do next in their lives. So.
Indeed. No, indeed. Well, that's a really nicely put, and some lovely things there, and certainly some things that I resonate with. It's been great. The only last thing I haven't asked you about, actually, which I wanted to cover. So you're the first knighted person. You're the first sir that I've ever spoken to. But what was that like as an experience, being knighted?
Wonderful.
Proudest moment in your career, would you say?
Of course. Of course. And with only one deep regret, which was that my mum wasn't alive to see it happen. My father was, but he was in a nursing home, and I mean, I told him I'd been knighted, but he didn't. I don't think he even registered. But my mum would have been so proud, and it was an amazing moment and an amazing ceremony, and I was lucky enough to be knighted by the Queen. So I saw. We're slightly different heights, with no disrespect to Her Majesty. And I hadn't realized, I'd never met her before. I hadn't realized that I'm rather taller than her. And my father used to work for her right at the beginning of his career. Wow. He trained as a farm manager at Sandringham. In fact, I was born at Sandringham in a cottage in 1954. So I told her, I said, Mum, my dad used to work for you. And she was rather fun. She was nice enough to say that was interesting. So, yeah. No, it was amazing. And it is, it is life-changing in the sense that Marie Curie loved it. The organization loved the fact that their chief executive was being knighted. It lifted the whole organization.
Of course.
Because did I deserve it? Probably not. But because after all, I was only doing a paid job. But from the organization's point of view, it was richly deserved, even though I received it. And I think everyone in the organization took it as a compliment that we, Marie Curie, had done a good job for the nation, and our chief executive was being knighted.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Can I ask you a question? How did you get hold of me? I can't remember.
So we were introduced by Jonathan Lofthouse about a year ago. You were due to deliver a keynote at
That's right.
Mine.
That's right.
Last November, right. But I think it's around the time your brother died.
It was.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. It was exactly at that time.
Yeah. And so yeah, so I think I think Jonathan has worked with you previously, and then he made an intro. He was chairing the event. He made an intro to your team, and obviously, unfortunately that happened, and we hadn't worked together. But believe you'll be delivering a keynote at our event our virtual event in November around.
Good. Well, I look forward to it.
Yeah, no, as do I. But no, it's been a real pleasure, and it's been great to get to know the person behind the job title.
Okay, and sorry about the noises off. I hadn't planned them, but they're here.
No, it's all good. It's all good. Hi everybody, thanks so much for listening to that episode of the P&E podcast. If you like what you heard, please make sure that you share this episode via your social media channels, as it really does help us to gain traction in promoting this podcast series. Please make sure that you also subscribe to the channel that you're listening via, as you'll then get notifications as soon as we release our next podcast episode. Thank you.